Our workouts usually consist of many different exercises, and the way we arrange our exercises may have an influence on muscle growth. So does it matter what order we perform each exercise in? And if so, how should we order our exercises during a workout? In this video, we will try to answer these questions. First, let's look at the effects of exercise order on fatigue. It is pretty intuitive that we are stronger at the beginning of the workout and slightly weaker towards the end of a workout due to accumulated fatigue. However, does this actually influence muscle growth? Well, this idea was explored in this meta-analysis, which compared the effects of performing different exercises earlier and later in a resistance training session. This was analysed for both strength and hypertrophy outcomes. For strength, we can see that the diamond is towards the right of the midline, indicating that the exercises performed first in a workout tend to achieve the greatest strength gains. However, for hypertrophy, there was no effect as to whether an exercise was performed earlier or later in the workout. So it seems that due to intra-session fatigue, performance is obviously inhibited for exercises performed at the end of a workout, and this directly inhibits strength gains. So if you want to prioritize strength, you would definitely want to perform your primary strength lifts first in the workout, when you are in the least fatigued state. However, when it comes to muscle growth, accumulated fatigue doesn't really seem to matter that much. It seems that lifting performance isn't really what is driving hypertrophy. It is probably more important to just ensure that you are sufficiently fatiguing the muscle. The next factor to consider relating to exercise order is the influence of compound versus isolation lifts. Generally, most people would opt to perform compound lifts first and isolation lifts last. However, is this really the best way to maximize muscle growth? This was explored in this study, which compared the effects of performing compound before isolation lifts versus isolation before compound lifts. Trainees performed the same full body training routine 3 times per week for 6 weeks. However, one group performed compound lifts first, while the other group trained in the opposite order, performing isolation lifts first. After 6 weeks, it was found that both groups achieved similar gains in biceps muscle thickness, although the group performing compound lifts first achieved slightly superior gains in quadriceps thickness, although this difference wasn't considered statistically significant. So it seems that great muscle growth can be achieved by performing either compound or isolation lifts first during a workout, although there may be a slight benefit to performing compound lifts first. The next consideration regarding exercise order is muscle size. It is often recommended to train larger muscle groups first and smaller muscle groups last. The theory here is that when you train larger muscle groups, you promote greater energy expenditure, cardiorespiratory fatigue, and neural fatigue because more total muscle tissue is required to contract, whereas smaller muscles induce less energy expenditure and fatigue. So in theory, training larger muscle groups is going to be more fatiguing compared with isolation lifts and therefore should be performed first. However, I don't think that people follow this rule exactly as they believe. This article by Menno Henselmans compiled the evidence on which muscles are the greatest in volume in humans. While the glute max is often labelled as the largest muscle in the body, the evidence suggests that the quadriceps group actually accounts for by far the largest volume in both males and females. Furthermore, the calf muscle group seems to be one of the largest of the entire body, despite almost never being trained at the beginning of a workout. And in terms of the upper body, it seems that the deltoids actually account for the largest volume, more so than the chest and lats, despite usually being trained later in a workout. So I think trainees often mistake training larger muscles first with what exercises allow them to lift the most weight. In either case, I don't know of any evidence comparing training larger versus smaller muscles in different orders on hypertrophy. So it is difficult to make any conclusive statements here, but what we do know is that the lower body muscles are all generally much larger than the upper body. And this probably explains why lower body training is generally perceived as more effortful and fatiguing. So it may be a good idea to train most lower body movements before upper body if you were performing both in the same workout, in order to be psychologically fresh to train your legs. The next consideration for exercise order is which muscles you want to preference over others. Some recommend that you should train the muscles you want to emphasize earlier in the session and the muscles you are less concerned with developing later in the session. The idea here is that the muscles trained in a fresher state will receive more of a stimulus, while the muscles trained in a more fatigued state will receive less of a stimulus. However, is this really true? This idea was explored in this study, which compared the effects of training the chest and triceps in different orders. 43 untrained men performed 3 to 5 sets of bench press and skull crushers to failure 2 times per week for 8 weeks in different orders. One group performed the bench press first, while the other group performed the skull crushers first. It was found that cross-sectional area of the chest was superior when performing the bench press first, although triceps cross-sectional area was similar between groups, with a slight benefit when performing the bench press first. Although it isn't entirely clear, this study suggests that if you want to preference a specific muscle group, it may be slightly beneficial to train that muscle first. Although I would say that this study provides more support for the notion that compound exercises should probably precede isolation lifts. Another consideration for exercise order is the rep ranges we perform for each exercise. In general, higher rep ranges are more acutely fatiguing compared with lower rep ranges, even when training to the same proximity to failure. This was found in this study, which explored the effects of lighter versus heavier loads on strength performance. 11 untrained men performed a single set of leg extensions to failure with 40 and 80% 1RM on 2 different occasions, and maximum isometric knee extension strength was tested at multiple intervals afterwards. As we can see, there was a more significant drop in strength immediately after the set and took longer to return back to baseline in the light load group, shown in the blue, compared with the heavy load group, shown in the orange. So although we know that hypertrophy can be similarly achieved across a large spectrum of rep ranges, higher rep ranges are usually going to be more acutely fatiguing. This means we will likely experience greater declines in performance from set to set, and for any subsequent exercises in the workout training the same muscle group when training with higher rep ranges. Therefore, it may be a good idea to perform exercises that you will be training with higher rep ranges towards the end of a workout, and exercises that you will be training with lower reps earlier in the workout. The next consideration regarding exercise order is for multiple exercises training the same muscle group. If you are performing multiple exercises training the same muscle group within a workout, it may be best to avoid performing these exercises consecutively. This is because once a muscle is trained with one exercise, it will be acutely fatigued. So if we were to immediately perform another exercise training the same muscle group, performance will be inhibited to a greater extent, potentially resulting in a slightly inferior hypertrophy stimulus. Instead, it may be preferential to alternate between exercises training different muscle groups to minimize carryover fatigue to the subsequent exercise. Although it should be noted that this is mostly a hypothetical rationale, not something we have direct evidence on, because as we saw in the meta-analysis discussed at the beginning of the video, acute fatigue via differences in exercise order didn't seem to have any major impact on muscle growth. Now moving on to a slightly more practical topic, let's discuss the use of supersets or circuit type training. This strategy is a little different to the traditional workout structure of performing one exercise followed by another and so on. Instead, this involves alternating between sets of 2 or more exercises. This can be beneficial from a time efficiency standpoint, usually allowing more sets to be completed in a shorter amount of time, while still allowing enough rest between muscle groups to be highly effective. As a quick overview, I would recommend supersets or circuit type training to be conducted with 2 primary considerations in mind. First is for exercise selection. This works best for exercises that aren't highly fatiguing on the cardiorespiratory system. This is usually going to be more machine-based or isolation lifts as opposed to free weight compound lifts, especially for the lower body, such as squat and deadlift variations. And second is for which muscle groups are trained. Ideally, you want to alternate between exercises which train different muscle groups, such as a pressing and pulling movement, as opposed to exercises which train the same muscles, such as a bench press and a chest fly. When implemented in such a way, it seems that we can achieve similar muscle growth compared with traditional training within a shorter duration. For example, this study explored the effects of antagonistic paired sets on muscle growth. 16 untrained males performed 3 sets of leg curls and leg extensions 2 times per week for 6 weeks. Half the subjects performed a traditional workout structure, performing 3 sets of leg curls followed by 3 sets of leg extensions with 2 minutes rest between sets. The other half alternated between leg curls and extensions, but still allowing 2 minutes rest between each set of the same exercise. It was found that both groups saw significant growth of the quadriceps and hamstrings with no differences between them. However, it was reported that the traditional workouts took around 13 minutes to complete on average, while the paired sets were completed in around 7 minutes. So this study suggests that alternating between antagonistic exercises can result in equivalent muscle growth in a shorter duration. This can improve time efficiency in the gym, allowing you to either get the same workout completed in a shorter duration or perform more work in the same time period. However, this may not be entirely practical in all public gyms, as you may be taking up multiple pieces of equipment, which can sometimes interfere with other people's workouts. So based on this information, let's now establish some practical recommendations. Well, the order we perform our exercises within a workout can have an impact on acute fatigue and therefore the performance of subsequent sets. However, this doesn't seem to have a major impact on muscle growth, provided that we are taking each set close to failure. Although, to make things maximally effective, it may be beneficial to structure our workouts with the following considerations in mind. Compound free weight lower body exercises performed in lower rep ranges should generally be performed earlier in the workout, and isolated machine-based upper body exercises performed with higher rep ranges should generally be performed later in the workout. Furthermore, if you want to specifically prioritize a certain muscle group, it may be beneficial to train that muscle group earlier in the workout so that it is trained in a less fatigued state. And if possible, you would probably want to avoid performing multiple exercises training the same muscle group in succession within the same workout. And lastly, if you want to make your training sessions more time efficient, a useful strategy can be to perform supersets or circuit style training for exercises which don't train the same muscle groups. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Check out flowhighperformance.com for online coaching, training templates, ebooks, and more.